Hey everyone, it's Deja from CrochetEverAfter.com. Today we're going to make some appliques. If you've ever seen any of my applique videos, you know that this is the basic intro to all of them. So you can click the link that's popping up to go straight to the beginning of the tutorial. Otherwise, I'm going to talk about what you can do with appliques, how to attach them, how to make them different sizes, what kind of yarn to use, and also why it's a really good idea to learn how to read looking for the word, reading charts, how to read charts. So appliques are a great, fun, quick crochet project, and they can help you learn new stitches and how to interpret written patterns because they stick a lot of different stitches into a very small project. Now, if you've ever made appliques before, you know that you can use them in a variety of ways. You can stick them on clothes, on blankets, on hats, headbands, shoes, scrapbooks. You can do just about anything with these. They are, the ones that I've written up for you are just about the perfect size to go on anything, but you can change their size. I use Knit Picks Brava worsted weight yarn, which is like a medium weight yarn, or a number 4 in the yarn standards, and it's perfect size for most things. But if you want to make it bigger, you can get a bulky size yarn and a bigger hook and make them a lot bigger, or get lace weight yarn and make them really small, and that'd be perfect for scrapbooks or anything that you want to make really tiny embellishments for. So you can change the size fairly easily. Now for the yarn, I told you I use Knit Picks Brava. It's a 100% acrylic yarn. You can find it on knitpicks.com, but you can use just about any kind of yarn you want. Just make sure that where you're putting it, you're picking a good yarn. So if you're putting it on clothes, like a pair of jeans that are going to get washed a lot, acrylic's a good way to go because usually you can wash and dry it very easily. You don't want to pick a 100% wool because you're going to felt it the first time you wash it. Now if you want a felted applique, that's perfectly fine too, because a lot of these will look great felted up, and I'll even show you some as we go. Now, to attach them to your projects, depending on what you're putting it on, you're going to use different kinds of methods to attach. So if you're putting a crochet flower on a beanie, you can just use yarn, of course a crochet beanie. If you're using a knit beanie or a material type, you might want to use a needle and thread or a sewing machine. Same goes with clothes, just use needle and thread to put it on. However, if you're putting it in a scrapbook or on a headband, you might want to use glue. So hot glue maybe for the headband, and then something that's paper friendly for your scrapbook. It's totally going to depend on where you want to put it, but you'll figure out what's the easiest way for you to attach it. Now for your actual charts, why it's a good idea to learn how to read these. As I go through the tutorials, I'm going to show you, well, I'm going to say the written part of the pattern, but I'm also going to show you the chart for the pattern. And that way, as you go, you're going to get familiar with the universal symbols that we use for crochet. And you'll see how to read a chart, how to kind of decipher all of the jumbled symbols that are all over the place. It's going to really help you so that if you want to make a pattern maybe from Japan and you don't read Japanese, like I don't, you can look at the stitch chart and easily make that pattern because you know all of the symbols already. So charts are a great tool when you want to make a pattern that isn't in a language that you know how to read. Now let's go grab some yarn and we're going to get started right now. Alright, so we're going to make this cute little applique heart here. All of my appliques are made with the Knit Picks Brava worsted, and I'm using a 5mm USH hook. So you can substitute bigger hooks for bigger yarn and smaller hooks for smaller yarn if you want. But let's get started with our chart. Now, our charts are great tools for when our written instructions don't make much sense, or if you can't read the language that they're written in. It gives you a visual of what you're making. So if I turn this just slightly, you can see our heart outline. So this chart is written and it's kind of shaped just like what we're making. It also lets us know how we're working our pattern. This one is worked in rounds, and you can see that we have a round here and a round here. And we have round markers, so it tells us this is where we're starting because this is round 1, and this is where we're finishing on round 2. The different colors also help us distinguish what stitches go in what round. Now, this very center symbol here is actually not a stitch, but it's our beginning marker. And when we look at our stitch legend, it tells us what it is. It says that this little circular spiral is an adjustable ring. So what that tells me is I'm going to start my pattern with an adjustable ring, and what am I going to do in this adjustable ring? Well, my round 1 is what I'm working. So I see I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of the same kind of symbol. And you can see they're all different turns. I can't think of the word that I'm looking for, but they're all situated differently, but it's the same stitch. It's because it's worked around that adjustable ring that they are turned slightly. So if I look on my legend, I will see that a cross means a single crochet. So one thing, single crochets can either be a cross or you'll see them as an X on stitch diagrams. So those are used interchangeably, so whether you see a cross or an X, that's always going to be a single crochet. So my chart tells me I'm doing 5 single crochets into my adjustable loop. And then I have this black closed dot. What does that mean? That means I'm slip stitching. So that tells me that I'm going to finish this round with a slip stitch in that first single crochet. So we are going to get started on that first round now. So I've got my yarn. I'm going to start with my magic adjustable loop or my adjustable ring or whatever it is that you like to call that. And I always like to do a little slip stitch to anchor it. It's not required, but I just like it that way I don't have to hold on to it as much. And I do a chain 1 just to start it off. So I'm going to do 5 single crochets. I try to keep them close to each other so they don't get all stretched out of shape because this ring is quite big. So once I finish all 5, before I join, I'm going to close my loop up. So I've got 5 finished. Grab my tail and I pull my adjustable ring closed. Now I'm going to join it with a slip stitch. Sometimes it can get a little confusing where to stick your hook on these small adjustable rings when they don't have too many stitches. So just count backwards from the stitches you made. Look at your V's. You have 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So that's where I want to put my hook and join my round. Make sure you're going under the loops of the V. They usually turn. You can see that they're kind of facing forward right now. So make sure you're going under both of those when you catch it and do your slip stitch. So I've got round 1 of my heart made, and now I'm ready for round 2. So let's take a look at our chart again. Now our chart has lots of different symbols. So we can just ignore that first round and we're going to look at round 2. We slip stitched, and most of the times you're going to work from that slip stitch. So you're going to look up to round 2 and see what's coming out of that slip stitch. Whatever stitch you made last, you're going to usually, unless it tells you to fasten off to maybe join a new color, you're going to be working out of the last stitch of the previous round. So this one shows us chain 3, and that chain 3 is going to count as a double crochet. So if we turn this sideways, you can see that we have kind of a mirrored effect for our heart. We have 3 double crochets here, because we're counting that as a double crochet. We have 3 over here. These are half double crochets, these symbols, and then we have half and treble. How do I know all these symbols? I've memorized them. But if you don't remember, that's what your stitch legend's for. Look at it and it'll tell you what stitch you're going to do. Now, how do we interpret where to put these stitches? Well, we look at our previous round. So we have the chain 3, and remember we slip stitched into that first single crochet. So it's telling us chain 3 out of that slip stitch, and put 2 double crochets right in that stitch, because they are all coming out of that stitch. So let's first do those 3 stitches. So I'm going to chain 3, and then I'm going to double crochet right back in there. And then one more to finish off that stitch, or what I need to do in that stitch. Now, let's check out my chart. Finish this stitch, finish that group of stitches. Now I'm going to my next stitch. What's coming out of this stitch? Well, I've got 3 half double crochets. So in my next stitch, I'm going to do 3 half double crochets. So for these types of working in the round, you usually have a lot of increasing that goes on. If you're working in rows, most of the time you'll have just 1 stitch out of each stitch, unless you're doing an increase in one of them. Alright, I did my 3 half doubles in that stitch. Now what do I do in my next stitch? Pull up my chart, and remember, we're working in a circle, so you have to go from right to left, just as if you were stitching. If it's easier for you to be able to read it, turn your chart, so that way you're not reading it upside down, even though this is pretty much the same going either way. Just to make it easier on you, you can always turn your chart so you can read it a little easier. So now I have a half double, double, half double, all in my next stitch. So I find my next stitch, I do a half double crochet, a double crochet, which is the point of my heart. That's the very bottom of it. And then another half double to start the other side of my heart. So I've got half of my heart done, and I'm working on the next half. So again, I can just keep turning my chart. Here's my one I just did. Look at my next stitch, and it's telling me 3 half doubles again. So I pick up my heart and quickly do 3 half doubles. Alright, now we're at our last stitch. We're almost done. And this tells me our next stitch is 3 double crochets. And then I have this lengthy closed dot. Whether it's a perfect circle or almost a filled in chain, that's always going to be a slip stitch. So when it's filled in, it's a slip stitch, no matter what shape it is. So that's telling me that I need to slip stitch into my original round, and that's going to help bring the curve of my heart down. So I'm going to double crochet 3 times, and as you can see, these are very fast to work up. If I didn't stop to show you each stitch, we would have been done already. So now I slip stitch right into, let me show you that one more time, finish those 3, and then I just come right back down to the center and slip stitch that. And I tighten it down really good so it'll pull the curve of my heart down. And then I'm going to fasten off. So I like to do a big long chain and then cut it. And depending on if you're going to use your tails to attach your applique, will depend on how long you want to make your actual fasten off. If you're going to use these tails to sew your heart onto like a hat or whatever it may be, you can make them nice and long so they're easy to sew. Otherwise, you can make them just long enough to weave in the ends. So as you can see, we have finished our heart, and that is how you make your applique heart. If you have any questions, just leave them below. Otherwise, thank you for watching.